or we might look at it as, how do younger people grab this country by the scruff of the neck and drive it forward? I know it's all of this 2020, 2050 conversations. You know, everybody, the catchphrase for this year has been, oh, Vision 2020. 2020 is here. And for this country to move forward, it would involve people like you and me, young people who I'm about to bring on stage, and young people like yourselves in the panel. And this discussion that we'll be having today would involve every single one of us, because some people have tried to move the country or certain states forward as individuals, but it hasn't worked. So for us to move our country forward, for it to be habitable in the future, right, and for us to live well, it involves every single one of us. The United Nations has stated that in 2050, Nigerian population will be well over 400 million. The roads are already hard to pass. The healthcare system is stressed. The educational system is in decay. So how then do we continue to work, you know, with this same energy, or do we need to ramp up our energy, or do we just need to all move to Canada and forget Nigeria, right? So we'll be having those discussions today, and without further ado, I'd like to welcome the panelists. Already on stage is Mrs. Sholakwe Hammond. She is the Special Assistant to the Lagos State Governor on Sustainable Development Goals and Investment. Please. Round of applause for her. She's a special advisor, not assistant. Next, I'd like to bring on stage is Dr. Ola Brown. She's a medical doctor, a trainee helicopter pilot, and an entrepreneur who founded West Africa's first indigenous air ambulance service, the Flying Doctors Nigeria. This company saves hundreds of lives across West and Central African region every single year, especially in the oil and gas industry, rendering medical evacuation services. Dr. Brown is passionate about healthcare in Africa and works with various businesses, charities, and governments to improve standards of healthcare. Another round of applause for her, please. The next person that I would like to bring up is Mrs. Titilope Oni. As you know, if you look at our panel right now, there are 3 ladies. And you should know that for Nigeria to succeed, you know, there needs to be gender parity. It's even proven, statistics say that if you put household income in the hands of women, the household is bound to do better. So, hey, maybe we should put Nigeria in the hands of women, and, you know, we will move much faster to where we need to be. Mrs. Titi Lokoni is an economist with years of experience in macroeconomic and industry analysis. She has a master's degree in economics from the University of Ibadan and is a member of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Nigeria. She's a young leader passionate about poverty alleviation and economic empowerment. She is the acting head think tank operations at the Nigerian Economic Summit Group. Round of applause for her. Penultimate is Mr. Wilson Erumebo. With over a decade of experience in socio-economic research and data policy analysis and policy advocacy, Wilson has expertise and keen interest in macroeconomic research, monetary and fiscal policies, industry analysis, education, youth development, and poverty studies. He is currently a senior economist at the Nigerian Economic Summit Group, Nigeria's foremost think tank and advocacy group, where he leads the preparation of influential reports that provide insights on how Nigeria can improve the quality of economic growth and address unemployment and poverty. Round of applause for Wilson, please. As you can see, our stage is balanced, in my opinion. Also, we've balanced people from private sector, from the public sector, and closest to me here, we have 2 economists who are wearing glasses. You know, so when it comes, when it comes to economists, they always have the stats and the numbers to go with it. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome our last panelist, not taking this chair, but on this side of the stage, which is every one of you, in the audience. So a round of applause for yourselves. So let's get into the conversation. There's so much context that we can put to things. When you look at Nigeria every day, you all experience, the difficulties. But I would like to start with Wilson. Wilson, so much can be said, but Nigeria currently has a population of about 200 million, right? And in 2050, UN projects a population of over 400 million. It seems, Wilson, that the population doubles every 30 years, and as the senior economist at the NESG, what's the implication to this, and help us make sense of it?
Thank you, and it's a pleasure to be here today. In addition to the fact that the country would have over 400 million people by 2050, Nigeria would also be the third most populous country in the world after India and China. So if you look at the demographics, about 67% of this population would be below 35 years. So we're talking about close to 270 million people, young people below 35 years. And that's also a very huge number. I mean, it's even more than the current population we have now. So all of these would have significant impact on different aspects of our lives, of our daily lives. One of the things we looked at was the impact on infrastructure. So there's going to be a huge infrastructure demand from all the different segments of the population. Imagine Lagos today, for instance, we're currently about 25 million or so, depending on which of the statistics you're quoting. But the question is, are we really, is there really a significant growth or expansion of infrastructure to accommodate this growing population? So by 2050, the estimate is more like Lagos could be somewhere around 50 million, because it accounts for about 12% of Nigeria's population. So with a population of 50 million, is the infrastructure going to expand at that pace? Because currently we're significantly facing the issues of traffic here and there. The amenities are not, are not adequate. So all of these, the fact that the population is expanding would also create so much demand, so much pressure on existing infrastructure. The other thing is on social amenities, education, facilities, healthcare, and all that. There's also going to be so much pressure on that direction. You look at food security, an extra 200 million people would need more food. So that tells you that is our agricultural sector growing enough to meet that demand, or the future demand that will come into play. The other thing is on human capital development. For instance, the number of teachers that we would need, number of doctors, number of professionals across all the different sectors. And lastly, and also more importantly, is the fact that there's going to be a huge demand for jobs, which is also very important, because if you grow an economy, if you grow a population and you have over 400 million people, what will people be doing? How productive are we going to be at the time? Would people be productively engaged to do work and impact and add value to the society? So I think these are some of the pressure points that we would likely see going into 2050. And what we've done at the NESG is to say that all of these factors that we've mentioned, first the population factor, in addition to factors like urbanization, more Nigerians are more likely going to move towards the cities, creating additional pressures. There's also the fact that climate change is something that, we've seen the impact in terms of flooding across different parts of the country. The weather season sometimes can be so unpredictable. So there's urbanization, climate change. There are also issues about the rise of renewable energy. So for instance, a lot of countries are not, crude oil might not even be significant by the year 2050. Probably we'll be talking about electric cars, which already is happening in different parts of the country, of the world, So all of these, a combination of all these factors, and as well as our response as a nation, with emphasis to our response as a nation, we at the NESG, we looked at all these factors and said how we respond to them would determine the 3 different pathways for Nigeria going into 2050. So we called it the 2050 scenarios for Nigeria. So the first scenario, it looks at basically a moderate case scenario where Nigeria does not really rise significantly, or Nigeria does not collapse. So more like things, the status quo, things keep going, at a considerable pace, and then we are not significantly pulling people out of poverty. The other scenario looks at Nigeria rises, a case where if we make some of those hard reforms, we invest in our people, invest in infrastructure, Nigeria could become the 7th largest economy in the world. Nigeria could significantly reduce the number of people out of poverty, create significant number of jobs, whether it's full-time paid jobs or through entrepreneurship. And also, Nigeria would become an industrialized nation where we export and meet the needs of the global economy. So the third scenario, which is a bit more scary, looks at a situation where Nigeria fails. All of these factors that we've pointed out, if things continue the way they are and we don't take certain drastic measures, we don't invest in our people, invest in infrastructure and all that, we could get to a situation where Nigeria eventually would probably fall into a recession in the next few years. And even more than that, unemployment, poverty would increase significantly. We're looking at a situation where close to 75% of our population would live below the poverty line. And you can imagine how chaotic that would be. It's probably a disaster that we certainly need to avoid. So, yeah.
The 3 scenarios are Nigeria rises, Nigeria remains the same, which is the status quo, and then the third one is Nigeria fails. Right, so what do you think? Do you think Nigeria will rise? Do you think Nigeria will fail? Or do you think Nigeria will just remain the same? So we have a poll up for you. Please, the link is on the screen. Please take the poll and tell us what you think. Will Nigeria rise in your own opinion? Will it fail? Or will it just continue to remain the same? Please take the poll. It will only take a minute. And also, it's a social media week, so please join the conversation online. If you're joining us via our live stream, please join us on our YouTube page, Nigeria Economic Summit Group. That's the page. And also, please use the hashtag Nigeria 2050, and hashtag SMW Nigeria 2050, and hashtag SMW 2020 to join the conversation. So thank you very much. I'll come to you, Dr. Brown. Wilson talked about poverty and human capital stress, right? You work in the health space, but also without health, a healthy nation is, a good nation. Without good health, primary health care, and even in the space that you work in, people cannot live well. But apart from even health, education is also very key for us. Many of our people now, in recent years, are educated, but are they educated in the skills of the future? So my question to you is that human capital is critical, and the WEF 2018 Global Competitiveness Index ranks Nigeria as 118th out of 140 countries on health life expectancy, right? And 135th on skill sets of its school graduates. The 4th industrial revolution will lead to shifts in all industries. My question is, how do we tackle the current challenges and achieve a better and inclusive educational and healthcare system?
I think I'm the only capitalist on the panel, right? So I have to talk about finance and money. And I think that the problems with health, the problems with education, the problems with investment in infrastructure, for instance, you could look at them in an isolated way as problems with the healthcare system, or problems with the education system, or problems with the infrastructure system. Or you could look at them as basic economic problems that are symptomatic of the fact that we have a GDP of just about 400 billion for almost 200 million people. So if you divide all the money that Nigeria makes up by the number of people, then you'd end up with about $1,500 maybe, so about 400K roughly per person per year. So even if everything was equal, even if no politician stole any money, even if there was no embezzlement, if you divided up all the money that Nigeria makes officially and gave each person their share of the national cake, then everybody would end up with about 30K, 40K a month. It's just not good enough. Whereas if you did the same thing in England, for example, everybody would end up with $40,000 as opposed to $1,500 or $1,800. So it's not twice as much, it's not 10 times as much, it's not 20 times as much. They're exponentially wealthier than us. And England is actually quite a bad example. If you did the same thing in America, you'd end up with $60,000 for each person. If you did the same thing in somewhere like Luxembourg, you'd end up with $80,000 for each person. So the solution to Nigeria's issue is to raise productivity, to raise economic growth, to improve the economy. And how do you improve an economy? You increase the level of productivity in the economy, you increase the GDP. And right now, I think every single policy maker should be thinking about how to increase productivity. And how do you do that? There's only 4 ways you can do that. I'm a bit afraid of the economists, but there's only 4 ways that you can do that. You can either increase the level of investment, you can increase the level of investment, which I think is important. We've not been getting enough investment. In fact, Ghana, which has like a smaller economy than Lagos, received more foreign investment than Nigeria, which tells us a lot about foreign investors' impressions of us. You can increase government spending. That's another way to improve the economy. But as I guess a lot of people know, Nigeria already has quite a high debt level compared to the amount of money that it actually makes. So if we continue to increase debt, then we'll get to a scenario when we can't pay it back and then nobody will borrow us money anymore. So that's probably not the best way, even although we may be able to do that more sustainably by making sure it goes into the right things. The third way is to improve our exports. Nigeria has been a country that we consume what we don't produce and we produce what we don't consume. And if we can look into how we can produce more, export more products, export more things the world wants, then I think that we'd be well on our way to growth. So those are really the things that I think that Nigeria can think about doing. Those 3 priorities are things that I think Nigeria can think about doing to solve our development problems. And the bases, the pillars, the 2 pillars that any developed country rests on are healthcare and education. If people are sick, they can't work. If people are sick, they won't be economically productive. So this economic growth that we're talking about depends on healthcare. And also education. If people are not skilled, then they can't do the jobs. So people need to have skills, and our education system needs to improve. It needs to come into the 21st century in terms of the skills that young people need to be able to exist in this era of the 4th industrial revolution. So just to summarize, I think your question was, how can Nigeria overcome its problems? Firstly, productivity, productivity, productivity. Increasing investment, increasing government spending sustainably, and increasing our exports, and not forgetting the fundamental pillars of healthcare and education. The government, and a lot of governments around the world, especially in developing countries, look at healthcare and education as a cost. But it's actually an investment in people, an investment in economy, an investment in growth. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Brown. Healthcare and education. But one other pillar that I would have TT explain to us is peace and security and strong institutions, right? Because there can be good healthcare if there are no institutional healthcare centers, if there are no institutions that support what our kids are educated with, you know. And most importantly, one of the things that we lack the most here are good institutions, right? Institutions go beyond government institutions. they go into even family systems, they, you know, just strong institutions. And the United Nations has identified that over the years. You know, one of the SDGs is peace, security, and strong institutions. So, Titi, in your opinion, what does this have to play, you know, in Nigeria's growth and us achieving all what she said? Productivity is hinged on this. How does that work?
Okay, thank you very much, Yinka. Let me start by saying that the UN SDG 16 actually last year specifically identified SDG 16 as an enabler for the entire SDG framework. So it is actually very critical to growth. It would be good to look at the scorecard of Nigeria as regards SDG 16, and let's see how we stack up against other African countries. So if we look at peace and security and we look at the indicators, national security and personal safety. In terms of national security, Nigeria ranks 47th out of 55 African countries measured by the Mo Ibrahim Index. We actually scored 50%. But if we compare to, I know Ola mentioned Ghana and why people are moving their investment to Ghana. If we look at Ghana, we see that when it comes to national security, Ghana scored 80%. Coming back home and we're looking at Nigeria and the score of Nigeria regarding personal safety, Nigeria scored 38%. And that's peace and security. If we come to justice and strong institutions and we look at our scorecard, in terms of how transparent the government is or how accountable the government is to us, the citizens, we see a score of 34%. If you look at the strength of the rule of law, we had 60%. You might be quick to say, oh, well, 60% is a bit better than the 34 and 40 I've been mentioning. But if you compare the score to what Ghana has, Ghana, in terms of strength of rule of law, has 90%. So we can see why, in quotes, FDI, let me put it this way, FDI has just carried his slippers, dusted it, and said, oh, Nigeria, I can't deal, I'm moving to other African countries. We can see that without a nation that is highly secured, an investor cannot come in and put the money when he's not even sure of his personal safety or the safety of his employees, or even, he can't even say that if there's a conflict or something, I can easily seek justice because the rule of law isn't that strong. It's also be good to look at emerging risk to sustainable peace, justice, and strong institutions. UNICEF says that there are 10.5 million out of school children between the ages of 5 to 14 in Nigeria. 10.5 million out of school. Let's project 10 years or 20 years from now. Unfortunately, that population will be the population that will move and contribute to the unemployment rate in Nigeria. It gets more complex. Wilson mentioned that the UN projects that the population of Nigeria would double by 2050 to about 410 million. You can imagine, and over 60%, about 60% of that population is the youth. You can imagine how complex this situation is, because it's not rocket science. And an uneducated, unengaged youth is not an asset, but a liability to the country, and an emerging threat, an emerging security threat to the country. So we need to act. I need to act. You need to act. The government. When I say government, I mean federal, state, and local government. We all need to act. We all need to do things so that we can ensure that it is not complex. It's not as complicated, and we don't get to the situation where Nigeria falls. Also, regarding strong institutions, we need to start thinking of building strong institutions. We need to think of how to strengthen the rule of law such that if there's a conflict, people easily have access to justice. We need to start making government accountable, and when we work together like this, we can see that when we work together like this, we can see that we can contribute into having a sustainable economy that is peaceful and stable. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Titi. I think you have spoken well. And strong institutions are important. Peace and security is important because it's the foundation, it's the bedrock for everything. And it's the responsibility for the government, right? And once that is achieved, a lot of other things will follow. But slightly, let's move away from doom and gloom, because we talked about that we would like Nigeria to rise, or well, when we get the feedback from your polls, remember we're conducting a poll at the moment. Please go online and take 30 seconds to take the poll on where you expect Nigeria to be, in your own opinion. Will Nigeria rise by 2050? Will it remain the same, or will it decline? So I'll come to you, Sholakwe. To achieve productivity, you know, we need competitiveness and we need rapid industrialization. For context, we keep talking about, oh, we need to, you know, focus on agriculture. But subsistence agriculture does not take us anywhere, right? Even if you produce, you know, good goods and you export it, doesn't bring you much value. The value comes when you refine those products, because that's how you can provide a lot of jobs for people, you know. So in your own opinion, you currently, you know, work in public service, you know, in Lagos. How can Lagos achieve that rapid industrialization, right? And how can it be replicated, you know, through competitiveness all across the nation?
So thank you. So to scare you, Dr. Brown, I'm another economist. So you're actually surrounded by them. Okay, good morning, everyone. Very excited to be here today. Nigeria 2050, Lagos on competitiveness and industrialization. And I think we definitely have to add infrastructure, because that's, you know, fundamental to all of it. I would like to talk about Lagos as, on three levels. Lagos as an interesting conundrum or challenge, Lagos as a case study, and then Lagos as a promise. So Lagos as an interesting conundrum. I loved when, I think it was, I can't remember if it was Titi that talked, no, actually it was the first economist that talked about the number of the population. And population can be an asset, but that's if the population is skilled. We talked about certain numbers, and I don't know how many people know that it's estimated that 86 people come into Lagos, not every day, but every single hour. That's a migration rate of 1 million a year. So when we're looking at 400 million people potentially in Nigeria by 2050, we're already planning for 35 million people in Lagos by 2030. 10 million more people in this state. That is 0.4% of the nation. And we have 12% of the population. Those are scary numbers. How does infrastructure keep up with that? We talked about $400 billion in the national economy. Well, $140 billion of that is generated in Lagos every year. But the budget of the government, this year we have had our most ambitious budget ever. Please guess how much? 3 billion. Wow. So how does 3 billion support this 140 billion we're talking about? And bearing in mind that Lagos on its own cannot stop people from coming in. We're not a country. We can't, there's a lot that Lagos can't do, but we're not going to get into the things that we cannot do. We'll get into the things that we have done. So we'll go into Lagos as a case study. I remember I moved to Lagos in 1999 after I graduated. And I remember what Lagos looked like. You know, this was, we were coming out of the era of the dark ages of military dictatorship, and we had piles of rubbish, we had insecurity, we had a lot of things. Lagos did not look like this, much as we complain. I remember the Lagos of then. And Lagos had to take certain very deliberate steps with very minimal resources to do a few things. And that's why it's important to focus on the key things. Titi talked about security. One of the things I think Lagos has done extremely well is the Lagos State Security Trust Fund and the Lagos State Neighborhood Security Corps, because it was very obvious that for Lagos, the only thing that it had, it didn't really have very much land, it didn't really have very many resources. What we have are the people and the economy, and it was important to protect that. And so Lagos created a security trust fund with private sector do something that was not really in Lagos's purview to support the police. Thank you. The police is a federal force, but Lagos was able to create that partnership and provide support. Let's buy you equipment. Let's give you credit and petrol when you need to move. Let's basically help you be more efficient. And I think we've seen the results. Over the years, I remember the first time I saw a non-African jogging in Ikoyi. I was like, oh wow, people, they drive themselves now. We have a lot of foreigners who come here and they drive themselves, they walk around, they feel safe. Even at night, I see foreigners jogging without security. That has not been easy to achieve, but it has been an investment in the process. The same way, Lagos has also done that with providing credit to small businesses. So I love the Lagos State Employment Trust Fund. I think it's one of the one of the great innovations that Lagos brought in. We looked at our economy, small businesses, how do we create employment? We cannot employ all these people. So how do we create employment? How do we encourage people into entrepreneurship? We support small businesses and we invest in skills to help other people be employable. The LSATF has put in about 7.5 billion naira to support 10,000 businesses, train about 7,000 people on vocational skills, and train maybe another 5,000 on employability skills, and it's making a difference. So that's another case study of what Lagos has done. Identity as well. Before we could really get this engine of national identity going, Lagos realized if we don't know who people are, if we can't trace them, if we can't track them, then they can't do business. You can't feel secure. You can't even prosecute people for things that they've done wrong. We're basically living in an anarchical system. And so Lagos started LASRA, the Lagos State Residency Identity Card. How many of you have a LASRA card? Yay, this is actually one of the best rooms I've ever been in. Most people don't have a LASRA card. So, but we can still see that, still what, 30% of us. So basically, we need to be able to know who we all are. And earlier this year, or late last year, we signed with the federal government for us to be able to unite that with the national identity card. So we're hoping the next year or so, we can have most of Lagos mapped, we can have people identified, and then it makes a big difference. Businesses can do well. They know who their customers are. We know where people are if they do something that's wrong. And also, we should stop looking at things from the negative side. It also helps those who want to do well, but banks say, well, we don't know where. But for me, we're still in the bottom 10 of the top 64 countries in the world to come and live in, so I think that's good. There's a lot of improvement that we can make. But some of the things that were very interesting. Experts in Nigeria report, Nigeria was number 16 in terms of the work that they were doing here. So they actually like certain aspects of being here, but there are a few things that we were like literally number 64 on. So it's fixing some of those things and fixing the optics, but Lagos is a huge promise. I think one of the things we need to do is we need to work with everybody that we have. As I said, the point, our $3 billion in Lagos is not going to fix the problem. It's not even going to really put a Band-Aid on this big wound. What we need to do is to galvanize that $140 billion to all be working in the same direction. And that only comes when people understand what government is doing and see how they can be part of what government is doing. And we create those structures to co-create and partner. So that's the first thing that I think we need to do.
How do you think we can replicate it across the nation? Because if it's not replicated, then that immigration rate that you talked about would keep increasing. Yeah. So how do you think that Lagos can do that?
So Nigeria, I think because of this federating system, I don't think we cooperate very, very well. But there are many things that have been taken from Lagos to other states. So for example, only about 3 weeks ago, the LSATF was invited by the Nigerian Governors Forum to partner with a lot of, we've been doing this actually, so we worked with Edo State, we've worked with quite a few of the other states who've set up their own LSATF variants. And a conference was held, a 2 or 3 day conference, to work with a lot of other states to share some of the best practices that we have so that these things can be easily replicated. The same thing has been done with some of the financial, with the work that Lagos has done on IGR generation, even the LSSTF, the Security Trust Fund program. Indeed, the Amotekun Drive is really going to be leveraging the learnings of the Lagos State Neighborhood Security Corps and using that to then be able to establish that intelligence across the Southwest. So there are already attempts by other states, partnerships with other states to help them to learn some of the things that we're doing well. But unfortunately, we don't seem to work that well together as a nation to then see this has been done well here, let's all work together to do it. So maybe that's something that we can also push and drive.
Okay, thank you very much. Which brings us back to strong institutions. If there are strong institutions, they will see the need for synergy and will be able to put things together. The results of the poll, the first poll is in. The many optimistic people in the crowd, 51.5%, think Nigeria will get better. Round of applause for yourselves. 33.3% think there will not be any change. That's a third. A third of the people here think there will be no changes, that Nigeria will continue that way. And 15.2% think Nigeria will get worse. So we all hope, and I know that the reason why we're here is to try to figure out how Nigeria will get better. So we have a second poll for you, but before I do that, I introduced you guys earlier as the other panel. So I will come to the audience, and if you have any questions, please, by show of hands, let's take questions first before comments. So we'll come there, then we'll take another set of questions and comments from the panelists on the stage. So questions, please.
Good morning. My name is Oseni Gazat. My question is to Ms. Shalakwe. Earlier you mentioned the possibility of the LASRA card and the NIMC card being merged together. So how is that going to happen now? What's the possibility for that?
Second question to him.
Good morning. My name is B.M. Uluwatobi. I work for a lawyer. We render justice through technology. My question is, as you said earlier on, that by 2050, Nigeria is projected to be the third most populous country, right? Now, we know that education is the key for Nigeria to be relevant at that point. Now, we have schools everywhere, and then the only way to remain relevant is to ensure that the larger part of the population at that point is educated. So, how do the governments come into this? How do you prevent chaos at that point?
Good morning. Digital is the future.
Please, can you introduce yourself?
Sorry, good morning. My name is Oladuni Usani. So, what plans do we have as a nation, using Lagos to leverage technology to develop ourselves for the next 30 years as we go on? And what plans do we have to upskill people using technology as well? Thank you.
Let's take answers to those first questions, right? So the question from her? Yeah, please.
So thank you. You've hit on three of my favorite topics. So on LASRA and Nigeria, well, that's relatively easy. Essentially what it means is, and I think it's a great response on the part of the federal government to realize that if they collaborate with the states, they can move faster. Lagos is the first state that they've signed this partnership with. But what it means is Lagos will go out aggressively, as we do, to register people. And when you get a LASRA number, it automatically gives you a national ID number. And of course, we give you the cards, it serves the same purpose. So it's basically a unification. You don't then have to go and register for the two. And for those who have LASRA numbers that do not have, if you have a LASRA number and you have a NIN number, then it's matched. If you have a LASRA number currently today and you don't have a NIN number, when it kicks off, you then automatically be given a NIN number because you've been verified by Lagos. So it makes it easy for everybody. And then we start to have a unified database, and that starts to get exciting. On education, I had actually meant to mention that Lagos clearly realizes education is key. Our budget for education this year is not only approaching the prescribed 20%, I think we're at 12% now, but it's actually it's a 60% increase on the absolute amount of last year's budget. And the vast majority of that is for investment, so infrastructure or social investment. So it's going into building new schools, improving on the schools that are there. And we have an exciting program, EcoExcel, which is basically using technology to improve learning outcomes in primary schools. We're working with the company that developed that to develop that for secondary schools. So we're making a massive investment in education. We have also over the years been trying to make big investment in vocational education. As I said, what the work of the LSCTF, the great work the LSCTF has been doing, along with the Ministry of Wealth Creation. And then on the digital side, for those who know the Lagos Innovates program, Lagos actually they give vouchers to startups that have ideas, from ideas to growth phase. Depending on the level of your advancement, we give you vouchers to use in hubs so that you have somewhere you can work from and you have power and internet. We also support the hubs themselves to build capacity by running programs and to scale up, because we think if you have a hub that can give you the advice to help you grow, you're far more likely to build a successful startup, and this has been empirically proven. The third thing that we do is we have also started to give soft loans for digital learning. So you pick up a skill, something that's certified, and you complete the process, and then you get placed. Because a big part of all the things we do, from the vocational education to the productivity training to the digital skills, requires the partners we're working with to also ensure that a vast majority of those people get job opportunities. So there's placement that is part of that. And then the underlying factor is then how do you even build this digital industry? Lagos is putting in place 3,000 kilometers of fiber in the first phase. I think it's going to be 6,000 across the entire state. So you can imagine this state itself is how many kilometers square? 3,000 kilometers basically touches everywhere. And we're building onto, they're connecting schools, we're connecting hospitals, we're connecting government institutions, private sector. We're putting in place 6 ducts so that other private sector people who want to then put in place their fiber can easily lay fiber without having to dig the ground again. And so we're really we're taking a big bet on the digital economy in Lagos.
Okay, let me just speak a bit again on, just add some few points on education and what the federal government is currently doing. Before I start, I'll just give a brief background. In 2018, NUC came to us at the Nigerian Economic Summit Group with a draft blueprint of what the curriculum will be in the next 20, 30 years. And when we looked at it, because NESG is private sector led, when we looked at it, we are the ones that, well, in quotes, most of the people that looked at it were sitting at the industry aspect. They are the ones that will recruit these people. And they were like, hey, this curriculum is not relevant. We need to work together to ensure that we have a match between what you're producing and what we require. So for the first time, sometime in April, there was a stakeholder session that had together in the same room academia, government, and the industry. They sat together to decipher that this is where we're going, this is our priority, this is how the curriculum should be. And based on that, there was an MOU that was signed that going forward, education in higher education now, higher institutions, will be done between academia, government, because we need the policy and the laws to back it, and the industry, because they are the ones that know what they are looking for. So there's currently a roundtable on this, and they're supposed to review across board, do a competency framework as to this is what the industry needs, and this is how we map the curriculum. So going forward, it is more like when we come out, we are fit for purpose, and not that we have to go back and start on learning and relearning again. So that is what is currently on ground regarding higher education.
Thank you, Titi. How many people agree that the curriculum in our Nigerian universities need to be reviewed? It's about time. It's a lot of hands up. So, work is ongoing, to do that. And at that time, we'll start producing people that are fit for purpose, right? Talking about fit for purpose, Dr. Brown, how can, besides policy and those institutions working, what role does technology have to play, do we have to build more secondary schools or primary schools for 400 million people, Or do we start to look at how technology can educate kids in their homes, right? So how can technology become an enabler in education?
I think one of the biggest mistakes that we make in developing countries is assuming that what we do, our investments in health, our investments in education, our investments in security, need to be identical to what we see abroad, to be of standard and to work. And I think it's a big mistake, not because what they are doing is not good, but because we can't afford it. So I'll give you an example of health. The NHS budget, so the UK has about, I think, 60 million population. And the NHS budget, so the government budget for health, is 200 billion. I think Boris Johnson added 20 billion, so $220 billion per year. That's the budget. Nigeria's healthcare budget is $1 billion. So that means that it would take 220 years. If England, I don't know, Boris Johnson just came to Nigeria and said, you know what, Nigeria, I'm going to dash you all of our healthcare budget for a year. It would actually take us 220 years to finish the money. That means that your children's children will still be spending that money on healthcare. Even if he was to come and dash us his healthcare budget alone, our national budget is about 20-something million dollars, maybe $22 billion, sorry. So that means that even if they gave us the healthcare budget, which they are only using for 60 million people, by the way, it would still last us for 10 years, our entire budget. And the big difference between the British budget and the Nigerian budget is when that budget is announced in England, the money is in the bank. The problem is to spend it, but they've already made that money. When the Nigerian budget is announced, I'm sure people don't know this, we don't have the money yet. We're going to get a source for the money. So when they announce the budget of 23 billion, the president has signed, the Senate has approved, all that one is audio money. We still have to go and look for the money, be begging the World Bank, IMF, be sourcing Eurobonds before the money will be complete a few months later. So the issue is that the problem, and I think, like I said at the beginning, the major problem of poor countries is their poverty. They can't afford the things that they see abroad. So we have to think about doing things differently and be innovative about the ways that we can do more with less. And I've seen this work in India. When I went to India, I went to one of the cheapest hospitals that they have, which manages to do operations at like 10% of the price that they would in America, 5 to 10% of the price that they would in America, and still have the same quality, so the same outcomes. But in that hospital, there's no AC. In that hospital, nurses don't do personal care. So if you need to wash your patient, the nurse is supposed to do it, right? But in that hospital, they train the relatives to wash the patient. In that hospital, they don't serve food. You bring your food from home and feed whoever is your relative. And if you don't have relatives, you're on your own. And the number of operations that they're able to do in the same time frame. So I looked at the number of operations that they do in a month. They do more in a month than an American hospital will do in 1 year. They do it like Dangote. The conveyor belt of cement, that's how they're doing their operations, just one after the other. Bring the patient, the next patient, and it's very, very fast and very, very efficient. So they've not innovated around the fundamentals, which is, you can't kill people, and the people have to come out alive. But they've innovated around the service delivery to ensure that they do more with less. And technology also helps us do more with less, and that's what needs to be on the mind of every African policymaker right now. You may not be able to afford the Gucci shoe, but you must still wear shoes. The Gucci shoe
Absolutely.
might be $1,000. The China shoe might be $10. But still, as long as it's performing the function of covering your leg and protecting you from injury, that is the main thing about the shoe. It doesn't need to be designer. Thank you.
Thank you. We're fast running out of time. Before I take a few more questions and final notes from the panelists on the stage, there's a second poll that we would like you to take. So based on your comments earlier, we want to know how you would rank it in order of priority, the important factors necessary to achieve the Nigeria Rises scenario, which is the scenario that the majority voted for, right, 55.1%. So what factors, so if you go on that link, you would find that poll and you will quickly be able to, answer those questions. please do that now. There's free Wi-Fi. Please go ahead and do it. So I'll take final comments from the panelists. You have a question? Please keep it short, please.
Question is for public sector lady. I find it scary that we have 86 people coming into Lagos every hour, and you said that translates to over 1 million in a year. I'm still going to go back again to say that in terms of shifting of gears, what is Lagos State going to do as a role model to replicate things across all the states of Nigeria? Because Lagos cannot exist on its own. You said that earlier. We're part of a nation, and we need to be able to build the same thing that is happening in Lagos in those states. And if we have existence of some of these things there, people will not keep influxing into Lagos State.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, great. All right. So for me, I think it's two answers. I think the first is to ensure that it has to be clear that Lagos is welcoming, but to be in Lagos, you have to live up to certain standards, right? We can't keep expecting Lagos to be this amazing oasis, but anyone can do what they want. To live here, you have to live by rule of law. To live here, you have to be economically active. To live here, you have to be willing to take the opportunities that are given to you. And so we have to shape the Lagos that we want. I think that's the first thing. And because we're only responsible for Lagos, we can cooperate with other people and share best practices, but at the end of the day, we can only govern Lagos. So I think that's the first thing, and for us, that's putting in place, fixing Lagos itself. We did a heat map of slums in 2017. There were about 65. Last year, 665. So uncompleted buildings, unused plots of land, areas that are poorly lit. We have to fix all of those things as a government. And the second thing is we have to then create those economic opportunities for people. Lagos does about, between training and employment opportunities, probably about 20,000 a year. That's nowhere near enough, but those are the investments that we have to make, and we have to keep increasing those activities. The third thing for us, and one of the things we're really trying to do, is to engage the people. As we've said, we cannot do these things on our own. But the more people that understand what we're doing and we agree and we're co-creating and we're moving in the same direction, then the more interventions are likely to work. If there are 37.2 million small businesses estimated to be in Nigeria, probably at least a third of those are in Lagos. If even half of them are enabled to employ one more person, that's 5 million jobs. So we have to be able to connect with our populace and our businesses, for them to hear their pains, for them to know that we're here to address those pains, so that ultimately we can solve the problem together.
Thank you very much. So I'll take last comment from Wilson.
Okay, I would like to speak a bit on the scenarios that we painted, and it's interesting that we had about 51% of us very optimistic about Nigeria. And I think one of the things we need to do as a country to achieve that Nigeria rises scenario is we need to be deliberate about it. We need a vision for the Nigeria we want to have by the year, whether it's 2030, 2050, because no country develops coincidentally. It's actually a deliberate effort by the government and citizens of that nation. I mean, we've seen Ethiopia, for instance, Rwanda and Co. They all have long-term plans that basically covers different aspects of their economy. Where are the skills going to come from? What skills are we going to need in the next 20 to 30 years? How can we start building the next generation of leaders that would contribute meaningfully to the economy? And I think also is the fact that we need to engage more. Social media has become one of the biggest thing in this decade and century. And I think it's left for us to see how we can channel that energy productively to begin to ask questions and hold government accountable to whatever vision or plan we set for ourselves. How can we ensure that we live up to it and we hold government accountable to ensure swift implementation? Because again, I think this is also something we're trying to credible platforms like the NESG to see how we can, there's a lot of things going on social media. How can we then, as a platform or as a group, channel that energy to engage government, to ask critical questions? Recently, the president came out to say that they plan to lift about 100 million people out of poverty, which basically means 10 million people per year. How is that going to be done? I mean, we should be having those kinds of conversation and saying, this is what we think, this is how we can leverage on technology to achieve whatever goal that we set.
Thank you very much.
A little bit more engagement, and I think I mean, the government should not, the young people should get a seat at the table and also influence some of these decisions that are being made. Let's not wait for them to build a future that we don't need. We need to build the future that we need by ourselves and for ourselves. Young people may account for 70% of the population, but we definitely account for 100% of Nigeria's future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Wilson. Wilson has a lot to say. You can engage with him further on social media. He mentioned social media. Please engage with Wilson. Titi, 30 seconds, please.
Okay, so I want to say that a country is as good as her people resources. We cannot afford to have the largest number of out-of-school children. We can't. Also, government needs to be, we are brilliant in Nigeria. We know these plans. We know what to do. The problem and what we need to enforce with government and hold them accountable, they need to be bold and courageous to implement and do the right things. And we as citizens need to hold government accountable. Just a quick illustration. One of my mentors says that after every election, he calls like a community meeting, and they have a list of priorities for their state or their constituency. And they call the senator, literally say, Oga Senator, welcome, congratulations. Thank you for taking upon yourself this burden. Because actually it's a burden. You are saying you want to represent this number of people. You've taken upon yourself a burden to do what they say, and not that they put you there, it's time for you to enjoy. It is a burden that you've taken upon yourself. So when they bring out the list, you are supposed to go to the National Assembly and present that this is what my people want. So maybe what we should be thinking about, maybe somebody here should be thinking about is, how can I build a dashboard? Because not everybody will be able to call the senator and say, see, you're representing me, this is what you should do. How can I build a dashboard that people can log on to, probably click my state constituency or something? These are my priorities, and such that when the senator, wherever he or she is going to the House of Assembly to present his brief as to, okay, this is what I'm pushing, there is already a dashboard at the National Assembly saying this is what, based on what the platform or the portal that was created, this is what your people want, so that when the senator is presenting his brief and it doesn't align, they send the senator back, I'm sorry, this is not what your people want. So we need to be creative about things like that.
Titi has very bright ideas. Please engage with her after the session. Unfortunately, see, you guys there are many tech guys in the crowd. Titi has like a killer idea, so please engage with Titi further after this. I would go around the panel just so that they can say, I said 30 seconds earlier, and in 15 seconds they can just say their salutations. We have some gift bags for you. We have some gifts for you. Please continue to engage with us at nesgroup.org and official NESG across our social media panels. So the final comments from
so the productivity of an American worker is $70 per hour. The productivity of a worker in Turkey is $29 per hour. The productivity of a worker in South Africa is $20 per hour. The productivity of a worker here in Nigeria is $3 per hour. So my final message is productivity, productivity, productivity.
Wonderful.
Thank you very much.
So I'm going to keep it short as well. I like productivity, but my focus is partnerships. Right? I think we need everybody, I know that we need everyone to be involved in this journey. So I'm going to challenge everyone here. Spend 5 minutes a day watching national news, 5 minutes a day watching Lagos State news if you live in Lagos. The only way for us to move forward is if we're all involved. I think that's just going to be it for me.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Round of applause for everyone. So thank you for joining us today. Thank you for being here so early in the morning. Thank you for joining us via our live stream. We want to keep having conversations with you, so please visit our website. Please take the polls on the screen, and please continue to work at it and to work in groups, not as individuals, to make Nigeria a better place, and hope to see you soon. Thank you very much. My name is Yinka Nyolakon. Thank you. Bye.